and welcome to the Tabletop Tactics Podcast, the show where each week we discuss different tale, topic or tangent and hear from you, our amazing on-demand community. I'm James Jordan, aka The Bard, and today I am joined by Mr. Lawrence Baker, the Spider.
Hello. Hello.
And the infamous Castle Beard.
Oh, infamous.
Infamous.
That's exciting.
I'd say you're infamous.
Pardon?
I'd say you're infamous.
Oh.
I'd say you're also infamous.
Shrouded.
I'm definitely infamous.
Shrouded in infamy.
Shrouded in infamy.
Yeah. You've got an infamy.
Yeah, I guess I have. That was good.
Listen, I'm going to press it. I have to put in a rubbish joke or
joke.
pun.
That is true. I'm not sure what order these are being released in, but there's a great one about meatballs, so keep your ears out for that one.
I'm not committing to that, because I'm also committed to doing a handshake at the beginning of every 10th edition game, of which I did once.
You did that maybe twice.
And there was another one, which I can't even remember what that was.
We started saying sustained.
Sustained.
Overruled, indeed. I believe that's become, that's part of the TT canon now, sustained.
Yeah.
Which is good.
It is good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's what everyone wanted.
It is
what the people want. We've given it to them.
Consider yourself lucky, everyone at home. Speaking of canon, this is the weirdest thing we're going to do.
No, that works.
It was good, wasn't it? Speaking of canon, it's been floating around out there, and we know there's, this the whole, not necessarily the rumour mill, it's sort of been confirmed, but Henry Cavill has left The Witcher.
See ya.
Headed over to Amazon Studios.
Confirmed.
That's definitely confirmed.
Yeah.
He's headed over to Amazon, and apparently they're making a Warhammer TV show.
Witchcraft.
Ooh,
Now.
it's a spicy meatball, this one.
It really is. It's tough, isn't it? Because it's that thing of, it has so much promise, but could also be pants. So I want to discuss with you guys, what do we want out of this? Because I think we know with the Lord of the Rings TV show that an IP alone cannot rescue a TV series.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean? There needs to be a real careful balance between going for what the fans want, but also making a compelling television show. Because the obvious choice would be, make it about Space Marines.
It's the wrong choice.
Please elaborate, because I believe I agree with you, but...
Well, could we lay a foundation even before we got to that part?
Oh, okay.
Please.
Okay.
Please, foundation.
And then I think you should absolutely proceed with whatever you're about to say, because I'd be very interested in it.
Prepare to have your socks blown clearly off your ankles.
But I'm holding on to the bar just for the moment, because the first thing that we should probably address is, okay, we know that, well, apparently, supposedly, there is a TV series that could be made, is being written.
They've done a logo.
Done a logo.
I've seen a logo.
I've seen it, okay.
Now, the first thing that we should really be asking is, are we happy for Henry Cavill to be doing this?
An interesting question.
Should it be Henry Cavill?
This is interesting.
Is there a better someone?
This was on the docket, but I think we'll dive straight in.
Well,
Let's
I
go
think
straight
we've
into
got to
Cavill.
go with the facts. Like, are we a Henry Cavill yes or Henry Cavill no?
I'm a yesel. I'm a yes to Henry Cavill.
You're in the yes vessel.
Purely because my understanding is that he left The Witcher because he wasn't happy in the direction it was going, because it was straying too far from the source material.
Yeah.
Now, given the unwieldy nature of 40K and the very particular source material, I hope his heart's then in the right place of making it work and support that material, or not be sort of a washed out or sort of toned down version of what is the grimdark of the 41st Millennium.
Yeah.
So that's why I'd say I'm pro Cavill.
So not the Primaris version of the it's in a previous episode.
Yeah.
And yourself, Mr. Beard?
I mean, I don't know the guy very well.
You don't know him very well?
Personally. No, we've not had many chats. I think, based on what I've seen, he seems so into it, it being Warhammer, and him being such a huge star at this point.
Yeah.
I think he probably has the gravitas to steer it in the direction he wants it to go.
Yeah.
Now, it does depend very much on how much control he has.
Yeah.
But I think if he has as much control as he would wish, I think it could be great. Because you often see, like, there's been endless amounts of channels reposting stuff about Henry Cavill. But like interviews where he's just like chatting to someone and he's like, that looks like a Blackstone fortress. Now, I know he's Henry Cavill, but in a room of relative strangers and just saying something weird like that, you have to be kind of brave enough or like into something enough to say something so weird to most other people.
That's right.
But I think he's also such a compelling figure, and because he seems so into the Warhammerverse, I think he could make something really quite special.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting the point about the Blackstone Fortress interview, because I think there's a bit when he starts talking about Warhammer, or maybe it was on the press junket for The Witcher, and he mentions everyone keeps being like, you really like Warhammer, to the point of, I think like the actress that plays Ciri, like almost like rolls her eyes of like, oh, here he goes.
Yes.
Which suggests to me he talks about it a lot.
Yeah.
So it's not just for the cameras.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to get my points
No.
for being Warhammer. It's like, clearly he must bring it up on set, being like, that over there. And everyone's like,
But
That's also a very niche thing to bring
good.
up. It's not like, oh, that looks like a space marine. Like
Yeah.
a Blackstone Fortress
It's
is
really-
quite a niche within a niche, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a little bit vague.
That shows that he's
Really
at
read up.
least averagely read.
Yeah.
At least averagely read in the 40K universe, which also ties into my thoughts with Henry. So first of all, I am a big Henry fan. I think he's a fantastic actor. I think we're seeing
is awesome.
him coming to a point where he's hitting critical mass in his career. You know, a lot of people would have argued that was when he got Superman. I'm sure that is largely true, but I think he's actually gone from strength to strength beyond Superman. I actually don't think, although I'm sure he's disappointed that him not doing another Superman is necessarily a bad thing for his career, because I think he's able to do projects like this and do so much more variety.
That's a really good point, because you've got to ask yourself the question, what is he potentially going to be turning down to do this?
Right.
Very true.
Exactly.
Because it's not like
Exactly.
Warhammer is like a known quantity in
my point.
TV or film, is
This
it?
is my point.
It could completely tank.
Exactly.
And
you know,
let's be honest
He's saying
again.
now massive other franchises which are known quantities.
Yeah.
You know, potentially to.
Warhammer's
to do.
very niche.
Very niche.
For someone of his stardom.
But what does it tell us? It tells us that he, you know, you always judge a person by their actions, you know, and he is clearly into Warhammer, clearly, because there is no benefit for him mentioning these things in TV documentaries and interviews and so forth, because it is a niche. It's not some big commercial enterprise for him, although maybe it will be if it's a huge hit. It shows that he genuinely is into it. He genuinely loves the world, the lore, and I think we absolutely want someone like him to be involved in the show. But as you said, we've really got to hope that he is going in at that executive producer level, that he is at least able to have a significant say in the direction that it takes. But also, we don't know what it is that he wants to cover. What's the scale of the show that he wants to make? What's its scope? What's its subject? Which I think probably leads into, you said Space Marines is the natural choice.
This is the
And
tricky
you say,
thing.
what?
Right. So I've thought long and hard about this. Okay. You can't have the Space Marine show. Season 1 of the Space Marine show would be so astronomically expensive to produce, I don't think it would get off the ground in the first place. Because that is a lot of CGI. You can't do that with costumes and stuff. It's incredibly expensive. But also, I think for it to appeal to a wider audience, you have to focus on relatable characters, which are humans.
Yeah.
So it needs to be something along the lines of Imperial Guard, Imperial citizens, maybe following the wild and wacky adventures of an Inquisitor in the grim dark sort of thing.
Yeah.
If they were to introduce Space Marines into the series, I personally would like to see them left for a certain amount of time. And for that one Space Marine, the first time it comes in, to be so impactful, as is described in the lore, that it would just blow you away by just seeing them in the first place. It needs to have so much gravitas to the Space Marine. And the other thing they need to nail, which I thought about just this morning when we were talking about what podcasts they're doing today, when that Space Marine comes on screen for the first time, what are they going to say?
Yeah.
Because it needs to be at the end of an episode where like everything's booting off, all hope is lost, and you get this one Space Marine show up. These Imperial citizens have never seen one before. They've not even imagined in their wildest dreams they ever come across a Space Marine because they're so small in number. The Space Marine shows up when all hope is lost, and Len says something across his Vox scribble. What on earth is that one line, and then the episode ends. Probably the end of a season as well. And everyone's like,
You can almost like their delivery of the Space Marines. You can think of so many ways of how that like end shot is.
Yeah.
Like, even you can imagine like the goodies are right up against it. Like, goodies. The main characters sort of like are in absolute peril, and maybe like even if the like season 1 the Space Marines don't show up, but you just at the end like planet's being overtaken by something. It was all going horribly wrong, and then you look up to the sky and just that streak of like a drop pod or something. Oh, here we go.
That's the other thing, because it can't be, yay, the Space Marines are here. It's like, the Space Marines are here?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't good. Because they're not good guys.
That's the thing. There's something I think in the fluff that, because it's often from the perspective of the Space Marines, there's a really good bit at the start of the Devastation of Baal where this father's talking to his son, and they turn up to a market, and this chaplain walks through the square, escorted by like 10 Space Marines, and like they're like, the angels are here. Like, what does this mean? And like his dad's just like, can't be good. Well, this means death is coming to this world. Like they're all here, so it's like this real bad things are coming if the Space Marines are turned up.
You could flip it on its head as well. Why does it have to be a loyal?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you can absolutely. I mean, let's talk Darth Vader Rogue One.
Yes,
now, that's an entrance, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's what a Chaos Marine would be like.
Yeah,
you would be terrified at this monster coming at you.
I think in one of the early Gaunt's Ghost novels, I think it might be the second book when they're sort of setting the scene of the book. They're on this planet, and there's just this like horrible out of time drumming, like really like mind exploding drumming that they can't possibly comprehend. And it takes a while to go through the book before they describe the very first Chaos Space Marine they see. And they're talking about like, they feel like they're melting and all this kind of stuff. Like it's like beyond human comprehension. So it needs to be so impactful. But the other thing is that you can always add Space Marines, but you can't take away Space Marines from a series. You can't sort of start off big and then be like, no more Space Marines anymore, because they just feel a bit meaningless. So I think in whatever guise the Space Marines appear, which they kind of have to at some point in a Warhammer TV show.
Of course.
They have to, they literally kind of have to.
For me, that delivery is one of the most important things that they can do.
I agree. It's a make or break moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's a tough one because obviously, to go right back to your initial suggestion that Space Marines, a show about it being Space Marines, would seem to be the natural choice. The problem is, well, not the problem, but it may well be the natural choice because I guess I can picture a film studio going, well, these are really cool. This seems to be what the IP is all about, and want to make something on that scale.
Yeah.
Which I agree with you, it would be a mistake if they did do that. But money-wise, like obviously they spent a tremendous amount of money on the Lord of the Rings TV show. So it would be possible to sort of make a heresy type landscape in theory. And the heresy done as a TV series could be like, just imagine if they did have the money. I mean, it could be incredible.
It's a lot of seasons.
Yes. The problem is, well, I think obviously, let's face it, you'd cut out half the Black Library books, which were just got to over-expanding in the end.
Yeah.
But I think, it could be done, but I don't think it's the first show you do. And I think I liken it, and it's going to bring me to Gaunt's Ghosts, I liken it to Gaunt's Ghosts because, oh my goodness, I cannot remember his name. He's like one of my favourite authors, and he's just
Abnett?
Abnett, Dan Abnett, exactly. So Abnett and Dembski Bowden are my favourite. I love Graham McNeil as well, to be fair. But Abnett didn't write Space Marines in Gaunt's Ghosts to begin with, and I think it was actually not until book 4. I've read all of the Gaunt's Ghosts books apart from the last 2, I think. And the reason that he gave in an interview once as to why he didn't write the Space Marines is because he said, I don't know Space Marines well enough to write them yet. I don't understand their psychology because they should not be human. Because they're not human. They're post-human. They're something else. And so he went in from the angle of Gaunt's Ghosts. And so the way that he wrote a Space Marine through the human perspective was incredible because it makes them terrifying, or this potential savior or potential death of all things. That I think that is the way in. I agree with you, and in fact, so much so that if you were to introduce, because the other thing is, you kind of want a mass audience to get into it, right?
Yes.
If you went in with something like Gaunt's Ghosts, where you've got amazing written material right out of the gates, effectively a Band of Brothers type science fiction. Yeah. That's what it is, which happens to be set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Yeah. It would work really, really well. But here's the kicker.
Here we go.
I have a feeling, this is not based on any knowledge, I also don't know Henry that well. But based on something that he said in an interview quite recently, he was like, well, because someone else mentioned Eisenhorn would be a good one as well, which I agree with by all accounts. But here's the thing. He said something along the lines of, well, if I take this role, that means I turn down the potential of playing a Space Marine.
That's true.
And I think he would like to play a Space Marine.
I have a counter argument. Go on then. I wonder if he's not in it.
Oh, well, that's a curveball.
Because if you think, I know, and I think it would be a shame if he's not in it. Yeah. But if you think about him as a Space Marine, it makes complete sense based on his incredible physique.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't picture him based on how big the fella is as an Eisenhorn or as a Ibram Gaunt or something like that. He's a big boy. Yeah. He's a big boy. Yeah. And I think generally, it's certainly in terms of how I sort of perceive humans in the 40K lore, they tend to be a bit more svelte.
Yeah. Not very well nourished.
Yeah, they look a bit like they've been through. Yeah. I mean, it's the 41st millennium. Yeah. It's horrible.
They're living on a spaceship eating rations.
Yeah. So I wonder, that is a bit of a curveball. If he was just to focus on bringing it to life, if he then came in later. Rather than just at the beginning.
It could be a way to do it. I think the business mind part, or the business half of my mind would go, well, will a studio or a bunch of producers be willing to fund a series which they cannot plaster his face on front and centre and make out that he's in every episode? Yeah. Maybe the promise of him coming will be enough. Yeah. I don't know, and I don't know. But I would be very much on board with him being a Space Marine that appeared in said series, as an intermittent Deus Ex Machina that comes and saves the day or whatever. But look, it's going to be really, really tricky. But I do feel Gaunt's Ghosts, right out of the gate, if you're just looking for written source material that would translate to television really well, because the thing is it's not very dense reading. It's which translates very well to making it scripted in terms of TV and film. So it would translate well. However, whereas things like Lord of the Rings, for example, it did translate very well in terms of the films, but only when whole swathes got cut out, i.e. Tom Bombadil, because it got really dense and quite weird at that point. So, you need something that translates well to film. And the other thing is, this is the thing, I don't know if he's going to go for something completely original.
Yeah, that's true. He could do
that hadn't even occurred to me.
He could go for something completely original.
Because you could set up a call, because I was thinking this as well.
That would be very bold.
That's bold. It's bold, it's bold.
What is an interesting conundrum for them to have, if that, obviously we're sat here being like, obviously the Space Marines need to be in it at some point. If you're doing Warhammer 40,000, everyone knows Space Marines. They're like, that is the lexicon of 40K, right? But as a show that is going to have a huge fan base coming from Warhammer, you need a device or a narrative device that allows the narrative to jump all over the galaxy, because at some point, people are going to want to see the Elder. And at some point, they're going to want to see the Tau, or the Votan, or all the Necrons.
No one wants to see the Votan.
I don't want to see them either. But you mean, if you're Games Workshop, you're like, ultimately, this TV show needs to sell a lot of models.
Well, this is the interesting thing.
How do you get them jumping around?
It's such an enormous universe with so much source material. Where on earth do you start?
Yeah.
But I think Gaunt's Ghost is a great shout.
It's a great start.
Because it has to be relatable to the average audience member. You can't
weigh in.
You can't have Henry Cavill make a TV show for Warhammer fans. Yeah. Because you're not going to make your money back. You need it to appeal to a mass audience. Yeah. So I think if you had the Gaunt's Ghost gang, they are more relatable because they're human and they're different. If you had a squad of Space Marines, they're not very relatable, and they're not going to be
and they shouldn't
jokes.
Be. That's the point. They shouldn't be.
They're just cold heart. They're the angels of death. They're just produced to kill.
Yeah, that's right.
And spread the Emperor's good grace.
In a way, I know you were saying about obviously Cavill's very very sizable.
He's a big fella.
He's a specimen.
Very jealous.
But there could be an interesting dynamic of him being made to look tiny when a Space Marine turns up. Of people being like, in my head, I know Cavill is a very large person, and he's an Imperial Guardsman, or he's an Inquisitor, and then he looks like a small child because there's this giant behemoth that is just... like, imagine this is this Chaos Terminator type thing marching through the halls of this ship, and Eisenhorn or they're just like, nope.
Yeah.
Like, no way. No, we're out of here, lads. No way.
So here's a question for you both. So if Cavill wasn't the Space Marine, the first Space Marine you see, who's the first Space Marine you see? Who would be that role?
Could be anyone. No face. Got to be helmeted.
But if you eventually take it off.
Mum. He's mum.
No.
I always tend to lean towards the dark side of things. Sure. But that's actually because I think it's a really good way of storytelling. You have to create the drama. Like, this is from my drama school days. Like, in order for a scene to work, there's got to be a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And there's got to be, like, any dramatic scene is basically your normal rhythm, and then the rhythm gets interrupted, and that's the drama, and then, you find your way through it. I feel like if a Chaos Marine was one of the first, is the first type of Marine that you see, that will lend a really big, terror to and gravitas to the Marines, so that, and also, you kind of need a loyalist Marine then to get into the mix to save the main guys from it. You can't have the main guys kill a Chaos Space Marine. Not to begin with. It's got to be. No, an Ultramarine turns up or whatever,
That could be how you both introduce them and get rid of them.
Yes.
What is the first thing the Ultramarine says? Run.
Yeah.
As in, it turns up, there's a Chaos Space Marine crying in the hallway, this other Space Marine turns up, Cavill's looking at that one, then looking back at the other one, then the Ultramarine's just like, run.
You can hear the action.
And then the door closes. And the door just closes, you see them about to fight, and you just never see what happens. And then it's like, right, kill off,
that increases my point. You have to have the mystery and the intrigue around the Space Marines. You can't just be shown Space Marine action the whole time, because it just becomes meaningless.
Exactly.
And it's the complete opposite of meaningless. It's so like incomprehensible. Two Space Marines fighting one another.
It should be like devastating.
It's 1,000 Marines a chapter. So I mean, you've got. They've got to be rare. They've got to be that special.
Do you know who I think would be a good Chaos Space Marine?
Go on.
Mads Mikkelsen.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, man.
He gives me serious word bearer vibes, though. I tell you.
Well, maybe Night Lords.
Yeah, he could do a Night Lords. Yeah.
He could kind of do anything.
Could kind of be anyone.
Could be a really creepy
also
Inquisitor
be a great Blood Angel.
Yeah, he could actually.
Yeah.
Great.
He could.
That would be pretty
For Blood Angels, they all take the helmets off. All Ryan Gosling. It's all unbelievably beautiful. And it's just like, wait, what? Because it is hard, because I know a lot of, and I'm sure there's plenty of people in the comments right now, that loads of people are saying they want to see the Heresy.
Yeah,
and I think
it's
it's the big elephant in the room, isn't it? Because from a business, but it would make sense. Yeah. It's got all these books, it's got all these epic moments. You can see a Game of Thrones style Heresy thing. Yeah. But I think the weird thing is it's not quite 40k at that point. Heresy is its own thing. And you kind of got to get what 40k is and the history of the importance of the Heresy before you jump straight into what is a very complex thing.
The Heresy is the heart of 40k, though, isn't it? It is the primogenitor. It is what it's about. 10,000 years the war rages on, Look, the Heresy, I wonder if the Heresy should be made made entirely as an animated series, and you get your boy Sam Peterson to do it, who did Astartes, and
Yeah.
Now, he will do the animation brilliantly. You'll notice that he didn't really use any voices or anything. You know,
Yeah.
you'd need a really stellar cast of actors to
We've
bring
got
on
the Angels of Death
gravitas
guy
with
as
it.
well now.
Yes.
I did Hell's
yes.
Reach and stuff like
yes.
those. Oh, imagine those.
Yeah. Look, you know, it could be done, and the scope and scale of it then could be realised properly. Now, it's not to say it couldn't be done in live action. It could be done in live action. It will cost a phenomenal amount of money.
Yeah.
And I'm actually one of those people that believes quite strong-heartedly, actually, that CGI takes a lot away from film. And that should only be used to enhance and rarely used to replace. So i.e. you only use it to replace something which is physically impossible for you to make. Part of the reason the Lord of the Rings works so well is all of those Moria goblins and Uruk-hai, it's all practical effects. Some might be enhanced with CGI. In Game of Thrones, when the White Walkers attacked that northern fortress, they were all practical, but they did have some green. They were enhanced with CGI, and it looks great. There's something CGI can't replace something real. Like if they can make the armor of the Space Marines functional and have a person in it, because we've already shown with things like Lord of the Rings that they can make actors appear much smaller next to them. You know, with the hobbits and everything. So you kind of want that costs more money, strangely, than CGI.
They
You
could
see,
just
so
use that new Instagram filter. Job done.
perfection.
Done.
Yeah. But this is the thing: if you do it all in CGI and it becomes an animated thing, then it lives all in its own world and it works.
Because you do get that Who Framed Roger Rabbit vibes with CGI. That no matter how good it is, it doesn't have the inertia or the physicality of something that's even a practical effect. Like the reason why Alien kind of holds up is because it still feels like tangible.
Yeah.
Whereas as soon as it's CGI, after a while you're like, it does not look like it's real.
Well, that's the thing. The Alien and the Predator were practical effects.
Yeah. They look great.
And they look fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, great lighting. You know, great cinematography. You can get around. You can, you know, make the audience see what you want to see.
Yeah.
But even now with like modern Star Wars, like Mandalorian, most of that's practical effects.
Yeah.
And it just looks so much better.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And the actors I think just perform better. You know, when you've got something
Something to work with.
You know, like Gollum originally was going to be completely CGI, and they hired Andy Serkis in to just do the voice for Gollum. But Andy Serkis was so involved in the character. I'm probably teaching you all. I'm sure you're aware of this, but you know, he basically got so involved with the character. He said, "Well, can I be in the scene?" And they go, "Oh, well, we'll be able to map you out if you wear this." And then he realised, "Well, why don't we actually just paint over him? Why don't we actually use his body and his movements?"
Mocap him,
And you know, it brought so much to the scene, and then the actors had something to play off of. You know, Elijah Wood had someone to actually act across.
Feel like
what is
our
it?
heads are in the
I'm
same
just
space.
thinking about Andy Serkis involved in the project.
Oh, he would be brilliant.
The
Yeah,
voice.
but I'm a huge Andy Serkis
demon,
fan.
he could be some demonic voice that's like talking to someone.
Yeah.
So this is why I feel like the heresy
Voice
isn't
of
the
the
way to go.
Whisperheads.
Yeah.
Because the heresy boots off pretty quick. When you get to the first heretic and things start going mad, I think that's when you might start losing some people.
Yeah.
Because it just becomes like Space Marines, but then like it all, and it's also very, very long.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it, and then you have to cut out loads of it, and it's like, but lots of people like that bit.
Yeah, well, you have to basically lose all of the extra faction stuff.
Yeah.
Which is what they were doing to flesh out all of the different. You have to lose all of that.
Yeah.
That becomes
Focus on.
You can't tell a story properly that way. You know, the scope is way too big. So you'd have to go through the through line of probably Garvey or Loken.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you know, one of the.
I mean, the thing is,
you'd follow him the whole way through. You know. No spoilers, but you'd follow another character, you know.
like it could. The thing is, if it was done right, it'd be a fantastic show.
Yeah.
But I think
the heresy.
Yeah. It's just my worry is I think there's a bit more room for exploration of the world or the universe of 40K if you don't go down the heresy, because you can kind of, and that's when maybe something a bit more loose that isn't. Because I think what you said about Gaunt's Ghost, I think is correct, of that you need the people that know nothing about Warhammer to be sort of brought in at a landing point somewhere. And it being humans is probably a good start. That are just soldiers, cool. Soldier stuff does well on the old telly box. Then you elevate it and expand that. So whether it is just like a rogue trader or someone that has a ship and is just getting about through their life and then subsequently like ends up, I've acquired this ancient tome. And then all kinds of mad stuff starts happening. you need a device that allows them to kind of hop around the universe and have adventures almost.
And you can start off small. I'm sort of thinking about Band of Brothers in space now, and there's some of those like action scenes where someone's getting walloped by a cannon from a tank.
Yeah.
You could do that with a heavy bolter. Yeah. Like you could see someone be turned into not dust. What is it?
Atomized.
Spray. Just getting nailed by a heavy bolter.
Meat
shot.
chunks.
Yeah. That would be shocking.
And
but it's just
also-
heavy bolter. Then you can go on to a las cannon in Series 3, and then something else.
Well,
in
also you've
Series
got
7.
the Blood Pact, which are sort of one of the ongoing enemies of the Gaunt's Ghosts. Would be a really, really, really cool. You know, they're the entry into the chaos.
Yeah.
You know, they're chaos cultists effectively, but they're actually an organised regiment. The Blood Pacts. They're really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
It would make a great TV series, and I would absolutely watch all of it. You know?
Yeah.
But I think we should also talk about, and I don't know if you're interested, some of the origins of where a TV series like this have potentially, you know, blossomed from. Mm-hmm. Have you seen the Ultramarines film?
The Ultramarines film?
Yeah.
Is that the one with the Khorne Berserkers?
They're all Black Legion Marines.
Then no.
What, is it like an animated film?
Yeah, you've not seen the Ultramarines film?
An animated film?
Yeah. Have you not?
No.
I want to say I have.
Have you not seen it?
Wait, what?
Wow. Okay, well, if any of you guys out there have not seen the Ultramarines film, you should absolutely watch it. It's actually got a very good... It's written by Dan Abnett, actually.
Oh, wow, okay.
You're making me question whether it's called Ultramarines now, but it clearly is called Ultramarines. It must be called Ultramarines. It was released...
It's called Hell's Reach. Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it was released about, I want to say, oh gosh, maybe it is like 15 years ago now.
Oh,
10,
wow.
10, 15 years ago. But it's got John Hurt is a chaplain in it, voicing the chaplain.
I have seen
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
Sean Pertwee, who's like an English actor who's done lots of cult classic films, which I love, including Event Horizon and Dog Soldiers. Have you not heard of it?
You mean to tell me there's a film where John Hurt plays a chaplain and I'm not aware of this? What have I been doing in my life?
Well, look, it's not very well regarded widely.
Oh, okay.
It's not very well regarded widely. It's quite interesting that it is written by Abnett, who I'm obviously a massive fan of. But I do feel the script, you know, probably maybe. I mean, he was trying to write a script for the Space Marines and trying to fit it into, you know, whatever it was, hour and 20 minutes or whatever. There were lots of logistical issues, I'm sure he had with the delivery of that. So the story's not the best, but it's not the worst either.
Yeah.
I've got a soft spot for that film.
Yeah, I mean...
Unfortunately, the animation is not fantastic. It's not... I mean, it was slated and panned. It's not as bad as the wide internet would say. But, you know, it's not good. It's not what it could be, not what it should be. But it's a starting point. Mm-hmm. You know, they did have a good cast. Terence Stamp as well is they've got an amazing cast of voice actors. But, you know, it's... For me, the reason I'm bringing it up is a good example of why a Space Marine TV series or film doesn't work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't work.
Okay, yeah.
And I wish that you had seen it so that you could go, right.
Yeah.
And that for that same reason, it's why I don't think a Heresy series or it's not that it can't work ever, but it's so difficult to execute right. Mm-hmm. And this poor production studio that made this film, they got so absolutely panned that I'm not sure they ever made anything ever again. But, you know, it wasn't a bad attempt, but it's very difficult to portray Space Marines as Space Marines.
Yes. I think it is a really good point, twofold, because I think it's interesting that I hadn't heard of it and that it was slated, because I think it's that classic thing of, ironically, stuff even like, say, Hell's Reach, when that came out, obviously it drastically improves animation-wise, but to start with, it's just some guy doing it on his own, and it's very well regarded by the community. But as soon as a bigger studio delivers something, it comes with it a certain expectation that then means it can be very unfairly hammered if it doesn't fit the imagination of its viewership. So that's something I do want to circle back to in a minute. But also on your point of the humanity, or how do you make Space Marines work, I think that's also why something like Hell's Reach, especially the book, is so popular.
Yeah.
Because essentially the whole plot is that Grimaldus is like really depressed.
Yeah.
That's what makes it interesting is he's not feeling like a Space Marine. Doesn't feel quite right. And that's a fascinating through line throughout that whole story of that he is being more human, which then makes him more accessible.
Yeah.
But you're right, if you're going to do a proper Space Marine thing, they need to be Space Marines.
Yeah.
Which is like, brother, boom, 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 boom. You can't have being like, oh, I feel sad.
Well, the heresy shows the human side of the
Yes.
Space Marines because they are ultimately a part of them is still human in theory, you know. But that's the thing is you've got the surface level and then you've got to get into the characters. But what you got with the Ultramarines film was this sort of, you know, I don't know, they're kind of like almost portrayed them as like a squad of Marines or Royal Marine Commandos, you know, and they were a bit like, you know, there's this sort of this inner banter which didn't quite work.
Yeah.
And then obviously you had the animation, the overall issue. You need to watch the film. You know, I can't believe you didn't even.
I know exactly what I'm doing as soon as I get home.
I think it's actually on iTunes or something. I'm pretty sure.
I'm getting on this immediately.
Yeah. So it's. But here's the thing. I still quite like it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of good things in it. There are a lot of good things in it. Yeah. So amazing things like servitors putting on, preparing their equipment and the bolt guns, and one of the Marines is etching in. I forget what he wrote something into his bolt gun round, and there's a slow-mo sequence where it fires and you see it go. Look, there's some cool things.
That's
okay,
cool, man.
You know, if you hated the film out there, you know, go easy on it. I'm sure it was. You know, sometimes a bad film can be all right.
It can be good.
You know, it can be all right. It just depends.
It's that thing, is it is the weight of expectation, I think, on some things like this. And I think same with the Lord of the Rings TV series.
Yeah.
It had this huge budget going in, and all the headlines were, this is like the most expensive TV show ever made.
Yeah.
And it was Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
some of the most successful films ever made. So then when it wasn't the best TV series everyone had ever seen, everyone's been like, it was a bit of rubbish.
Yeah.
It was like, well, I didn't necessarily enjoy it, and there's reasons I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. But it wasn't terrible.
No.
I think it got unfairly hammered by people for various different reasons, but I think kind of unfairly treated to an extent.
Yeah.
I don't think it was as good as it could have been, but I worry with this as well, is it kind of is potentially, it's like that, you know, it's either going to go up into the stratosphere and do really well, or it's just going to be immediately, like, everyone's going to hold onto its legs, it'll never get a chance to launch.
Yeah. I wouldn't want that job.
No.
That's rough, man. Like that's a hard thing to bring to life.
Yeah.
But he must be very, very passionate about it.
Yeah. Maybe he's got a really strong idea then. Maybe he's got like, if he's visualised how he wants it to work.
Who's going to write it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well,
Are
it
they
wouldn't
gonna bring in
surprise
any
me
of
if
the
they
Black
get.
Library guys?
I think. Well, I mean, you know, the people that made Ultramarines got Abnett to write it, and it wouldn't surprise me if someone like, you know, Dembski Bowden stepped up, or you know, I'm sure it would probably be a Black Library writer.
But it comes at an interesting time at the end of the Heresy, because Black Library is now done.
Yeah.
Abnett's finished the last 3.
That's right.
Which will be a topic for another podcast, I think. So, I mean, I'm sure they're all very busy anyway, but all of a sudden you've got the whole Black Library gang potentially available at the same time.
Yeah. I wonder if they'll try and focus, Games Workshop will try and focus them more on the modern, the 40K timeline now, as opposed to the Heresy.
Business-wise, I think that makes sense because it's a more popular and well-known sort of part of their overall umbrella. I mean, arguably the Heresy has the most engaging stories out there. They certainly sell better than the 40K novels. Yeah. But I think in terms of like the overall product, I think there's more relatability there to most people.
You've got to think they're throwing a lot of resource at this as well. Like this is a big long shot gamble.
Resource for Cavill.
Resource for Cavill. Yeah, like
it's like skulls
resource
for
Cavill. Resource for Cavill. But it is that thing you think, if you're Games Workshop right now, this is potentially a huge gamble.
Yeah.
Because either it's going to be a huge money pit, and it's not going to get off the ground, and it will do fine, but then doesn't. They almost, I'm imagining, are wanting it to galvanize and inspire a whole new generation of people to find to kind of bring them out from the cold and get them into 40K. Because everyone knows it is the board game or war game that Cavill plays. Yeah. And there's been video games that have been very successful, but this is the like mass market, this is what 40K is. Yeah. And I think that question of what is 40K to someone who's never seen it before is the hardest question this team has to answer. How do you deliver all these very highbrow concepts in something that is manageable, episodical, and can be easily digestible
Yeah.
to a huge audience.
Yeah.
Well, I think people want it. Like I remember when it got announced the first day, the GW stock price went woo, straight up.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a lot of excitement behind it, financially and otherwise. So there's a lot riding on it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the end of Games Workshop, and it won't certainly be the end of Henry Cavill if it does.
No, of course not.
But I think the opportunity for it to be like a big hit that appeals to a lot of people.
A Game of Thrones-esque hit,
Yeah.
minus the last season.
Yeah. Basically, you want Game of Thrones in space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Well, that's
that's
what it
sort of
can
like
be.
the grim dark equivalent,
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
what it can be.
That's sort of what
Yeah.
you want it to be. Because I think something like Lord of the Rings is much more high fantasy,
Yes.
where if you focus on it being Game of Thrones in space,
Yeah.
then you've got the brutality, the uncertainty, the stabs in the back, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it helps it to be a bit more manageable from a filming perspective if it's a bit darker and grittier, because that's much easier to make
Yes.
than here's where the elves live, which again makes Space Marines trickier, because if you're going to have Heresy-style huge fleets of ships fighting in space and on the ground and in the warp,
Scope of it.
it just starts getting very like. How do you do the
Vincent.
warp? How do you do the warp on telly?
What, how do you do a Warhound Titan? Like, how do you make that work scale-wise with CGI? That's difficult enough as it
Yeah.
is, let alone ship-based
Yeah.
galactic combat.
Again, they would, I would hope that they would use a lot of scale models, like Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings, a scale model. You do a lot of your cinematography, they build it all up, and, because the great thing about a Titan is you don't actually have to have it move when you're doing the big turn,
Yeah, that's true.
but you can have a static one there, and you can, all of the small people can be all running around, as CGI. There's just, it could be done so well.
Yeah.
It could be incredible, but that is such a project. I mean, in some ways, like the Lord of the Rings was Peter Jackson's life's work.
Yeah.
That was it. I wish he never made the Hobbit films, but that's a separate story.
Well, he wasn't supposed to, was he?
No,
Supposed to be
Del Toro was going to do
Toro's
it,
supposed
but yeah.
It's had.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is, like you say, it is going to be, that's why that, again, to almost come full circle, that's why I like the fact Cavill's involved, because someone's got to commit to this for a long time.
I'm thinking of the things that Del Toro could have done. I'm thinking about PT now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yes.
You ever played PT demo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
project
Kojima
that
keeps
could have been.
posting. Sorry, I'm a massive.
This is a good tangent.
No, it's not. It's not got anything to do with anything. Sorry.
We'll cover that in another podcast. The PT cast. TT covers PT. But yeah, I think Cavill is the man for the job. He seems to love it enough to have potentially signed away, potentially decades.
Well, let's be honest. He's essentially turned away James Bond. Really?
Yeah.
Well, they must have either offered by now.
Yeah, he's obviously always been on that Bond name list.
Do you think it would have been a good Bond?
Do I think it would have been a good Bond? That's a really good question. Obviously, the quick answer is yes, of course he would be.
Yeah.
The problem is he's kind of done that character, an element of that character, a couple of times already. I don't know if you guys have seen The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yes.
It's actually a really good film.
yeah,
It kind of flopped at the cinema because it was out at the time of another massive film and basically kind of got overshadowed.
I think it came out at the same time as a James Bond.
Yeah,
but
the thing is, the film's really good and Cavill's brilliant in it. Also, in the Mission Impossible film where he was that agent.
Oh.
Yeah. But listen, I mean, how iconic's that, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's really, 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 really good at doing those secret agent type roles. So could he do a Bond? Yes, of course he could. But would he be better served doing other things? I don't know. I mean, it's James Bond. It would be massive for him. No, I think everyone would love to see him do it. But also, I don't know. Didn't they say something about the producers of Bond said that they want to get someone in a certain age bracket because the next...
Yeah, because in theory they're committing
to at least 5 films or something, which will be over the course of a decade or more.
Right.
Also, Bond's almost a tricky one as well because they kind of reinvented it with the Daniel Craig films of being way more like gritty.
Well, it sort of started again, didn't
So do they now want to almost go the other way and make it different and go more to the like, woo, gadgets and being a bit more like fun?
Yeah.
So that's a whole different can of worms of how do you Bond now that you've done the Daniel Craig films?
How does one Bond?
Does one Bond?
Yeah.
I guess I've just realised what it is, why I was so hesitant about Cavill being Bond. I think he would make a great Bond, but I don't want to see, from a personal point of view, I don't want to see him Bond because I want to see him do other things. It's like I don't want to see him.
You want to see him as a Space Marine.
Yeah, basically, I don't want to see him be trapped by Bonds.
Yeah.
You know, like he's already done a big franchise character. Like I've already said, I'm quite happy Superman sort of passed because I think that there's so much better variety, and he's got so much scope still to show as an actor. I'd love to see him, you know, the actor in me wants to see him do like really serious dramatic roles and the scope that he's capable of, rather than get stuck in a franchise character again. Yeah. But you know, if he takes up Bond, awesome. Of course I'll watch it. You know.
Good point. When you, because I've been thinking about this all the way through this chat, it's pretty mad what is happening. With him taking on a Warhammer project.
Yeah, it's huge.
Like, it's actually incredibly unusual for an actor to kind of pivot into what is essentially a very passionate hobby they're following. Yeah. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. No.
Like, I can't think of any comparison.
No.
I guess maybe like Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool.
Yeah, that is.
He suddenly was like, I didn't like how they depicted Deadpool in that Wolverine film.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
he was like, I'm going to make my own films.
But he became Deadpool. You can't become Warhammer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just
I am Warhammer man.
My goodness, it's Warhammer 40,000. He's here.
You're here to the rescue.
Yeah, that's me. He's sort of taking on all of it. The whole enormous, at this point, unfinished scope of Warhammer. They've not even finished the Heresy yet. No. It's not even done.
Yeah.
The Warhammer 40,000 timeline continues to move forward at a very slow pace. Yeah. There's so much that just has yet to happen, has happened, is currently happening, and he's like,
it's such a good
I'll
point.
do this, some of it.
Well, look, someone has to at some point, right? It almost seems it's inevitable.
Like, it's so cool that it's him.
It is so cool. That's why, I'm a massive fan. I think he is absolutely the right guy for the job. I guess just, you know, knowing what I know about that industry, like it takes one person isn't enough. It's going to be the moral of my story. Like he's going to now need a production team that will help him realize the scope of the project. You know, a director who understands the genre and is as committed to him to realizing it on the screen, or it will fail, unfortunately, because, you know, just filmmaking is that way. It's just, you know, you need, sometimes it's almost luck that you get all of the best creative people for that particular project in the same spot at the same time, and they create magic. You know,
They've really got to get it, haven't they? Because if it's just like, oh yeah, I understand Warhammer, it's just like, you know, sci-fi dudes in space. It's like, well, it's not.
No, it's
quite.
not. Because
really.
if like an American studio because they're the ones that have the most money.
Yeah.
But, you know, a big American studio like Amazon, which he apparently will be doing it with, you know, just throw a lot of money at it, but they throw the wrong director at it. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, well, this person's done, you know, Fast and Furious 55. They get action.
Yeah.
No. You know, it doesn't work.
No, exactly.
But it also has to pass the Cavill test, because if what we've seen is true, that he's moved on for The Witcher partially because it's not following like the story that he knows.
Right.
That's a good point.
That is just amplified to a massive degree with Warhammer, because I get the impression he's more into Warhammer than anything else.
It's his favourite.
All that kind of thing.
According to
so imagine the poor costume department that are having to come up with all of these crazy descriptions about how a certain Imperial Guard trooper should look, and then some gnarly Chaos fanatic that's coming out. Like they've also has to clear the Cavill test for all that stuff as well. So
what does aid them in many ways is that if you're a costume department for anything, say you're doing Lord of the Rings, you have a book that describes them.
Yes.
Then you've got to capture the imagination of that thing. What does that thing actually look like on the screen? Yeah. Thankfully, they have a lot of reference material for what stuff should look like.
Yeah, but there's not much of it that's humans.
That is
very true. If they're going to focus it around humans, you need to be thinking about like the whole Necromunda aesthetic.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Luckily, there's a lot of great art.
Yeah, the wealth. The wealth of art. Imagine taking like John Blanche artwork to Amazon and being like, I want to make this.
I want to make a telly show.
I want to do this one.
Has that skull got cables coming out of his eyes? I want to make a telly show. Also, a point you were saying as well, in terms of like how the 40K storyline moves on quite slowly. It just occurred to me of like, Because if you want to cover a lot of it, it's like, so how much time exactly, Henry, between the start of the heresy and right now in Warhammer is there to cover? Oh, about 20,000 years. Yeah. So yeah, like 12, 13,000 years that we need to cover? 13,000 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened during that time? Because
Oh, well, how long you got?
Things.
Yeah. I think he's the man for the job.
Yeah.
I can't really think of anyone that would do it better. And I wonder if it would have even got off the ground without him pushing.
Probably
for
not.
It.
No. I actually had a conversation with, I used to work for Games Workshop, by the way, very long time ago. He had a conversation with Henry just last week.
You're like, don't take Bond, man, do the Warhammer thing. Yeah.
This was years ago, but I don't want to actually mention. I don't want to mention his name because he might not like that. But to cut a long story short, this person authored some books for Games Workshop, and we were very good friends at the time. I fell out of touch years ago. I'd love to get in touch again. But anyway, to cut a long story short, there was I don't want to give away. I can't say too much.
I'm sure this is okay.
There was a project that was nearly greenlit that he had written, which was going to be for an animated series, actually, or could have been made as a sort of standalone feature. And he was in talks with various actors, including some big names that we would all know, that about doing the voiceovers for it, being characters in it. And so I suppose this would have been what Games Workshop would have greenlit before Ultramarines. Because this is before Ultramarines came out. Okay. So, and I said to this guy, I said, look, why is it? Because he was in touch with all of the big names that you can imagine working in Games Workshop and the board and head of Black Library and all that sort of jazz. Because you have to get a sign off.
Levels and levels of approval.
Yeah.
The administrator.
And I was like, why? Because I was still so surprised. Like, why have? And this was just when Lord of the Rings was coming out as well. Actually, I said, why have there not been a TV series or a film made about this already? Like, it's huge. It was huge back then. Why is that? And he goes, honestly, by all accounts, no studio has ever shown any interest.
Wow.
It's not that Games Workshop wouldn't do it. Obviously, things may have changed since then, but Games Workshop just never got approached. Apparently, Games Workshop were very happy to, back then, just license everything out. As long as you follow this set of guidelines in the IP and we get sign off on it.
They're not shy about licensing out.
They'll take the money. I mean, they've got 500,000 really terrible app games.
So many bad games.
Oh my goodness! Which where the characters basically cartoon impressions of themselves, not very grim dark at all. So it's obvious that there must be studio execs out there which are aware of the IP but they've just not felt that the money was there or the interest was there for a mainstream audience. So to answer your question, would it be made without someone like Henry Cavill? Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe not.
I mean, the climate's changed. Like Games Workshop's now probably much more recognised internationally as a big company, as a big player in the games market, whereas before it was tabletop gaming was very niche within niche. Things like Stranger Things have helped bring a little bit of coolness to things like D&D or tabletop gaming. It's not so much. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, it was not the done thing that you would admit that you played Warhammer. I didn't care. I did anyway. But there was plenty of my friends which were terribly embarrassed about it and scared actually that they might get bullied for playing Warhammer, or any sort of nerdy game. So they just wouldn't admit it, or they wouldn't talk about it.
Well, the culture wasn't there.
Yeah,
that's right. As now I feel that climate's really changed a lot.
Huge.
And Games Workshop are making more money than they've ever made before by quite a substantial margin as well. They're the most successful they've ever been at the moment.
Right.
So there's definitely a wave coming. They've not hit that peak yet.
No, they're not mainstream yet.
No.
But they're not mainstream yet either. Like Warhammer is becoming a word which a lot of people go, oh yeah, is that the tabletop game? Is that there's those little miniatures?
I used to play Warhammer.
Yeah, exactly. Or you get that. So it's maybe it It is time.
You can almost feel it in the wind. Do you know what I mean? Like they're almost due a big mainstream hit.
The winds of the warp.
Yes,
the winds of change. The winds of Warhammer.
We know his voice in the demons now.
We should mention this as well because it's all sort of ties in, in terms of inspiration and the path to getting to this series, assuming it does get made or film. So apparently, Paul Anderson, who did Event Horizon, that classic B horror movie, which actually is still a surprising amount of people don't know. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. So apparently that was going to be 40K.
Which makes sense.
He was interested in making a Warhammer 40,000 film. Ultimately didn't get the sign off on that for whatever reason. And so made Event Horizon instead with the ship, obviously, effectively travelling through the warp, right?
Yeah, 'cause it's almost like that plot could almost be the discovery of warp travel.
Yeah, and that's a great way to do a Warhammer film or TV show. Like
go to the beginning.
Yeah,
like not loosely, like not Space Marines.
Yeah.
Yes.
Essentially, sort of like you've got all of the connections there, and things are happening as you'd expect them to happen within the Warhammer universe. But it's not just straight to Space Marines.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, have you guys ever watched The Expanse?
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I haven't seen the last series yet.
I'm a few seasons behind as well.
I've watched all of them except the last season.
But that whole principle of like the big war building, but in the background, like that is by the by. That's happening. That's the big political setting or the stage that is set for the main characters and cast. But they've got their own little mission that they're doing, and they just then come across factions that are embroiled in this much bigger conflict. It's probably how you want to handle it. You have the context of the Imperium and Chaos and Xenos and all the rest of it. But we don't necessarily want like orcs straight away. Do you know what I mean? You kind of gotta like.
No. It'll also be really difficult. I mean, again, we're getting into touchy stuff here, but I mean, like they're one of the factions which could break the immersion very quickly, and make it become something. And again, this is just personal opinion, guys. It's just my personal opinion is that the orcs may not translate very well to film unless they are done. They are actually slightly reimagined.
They'd need a redo.
Because the comedy aspect that they bring
it doesn't quite work.
Won't actually suit the gravitas of the film. Like you don't have that sort of element in Game of Thrones, do you?
No.
For a good reason, right? It will break the immersion, and that's part of the reason part of the issue I've always had with the Orc faction in 40K. They kind of break the immersion a little bit.
Too comedy. Imagine the episode when they introduce the Orcs. Here we go, lads. We're like, oh no.
Here's the thing. I love playing the Orcs. I ran over a whole. Like I love the Orcs. Don't get me wrong. I just feel like they could be out of place in that universe unless you. It's an interesting one though, because even in Space Marine, the game, which is brilliant, the first game is brilliant. Your main enemy to begin with are the Orcs, and. They realise them quite well in that, but there's still a little bit of,
They're a bit goofy.
Imagine the end. Imagine the end of Rogue One, but it's still like it's just dark. It's just those big figures like, who's ready for a crumpy? And they're all like, trying to bang on the door.
I think you need to reimagine them so that they are actually terrifying.
Yeah.
None of this.
Tyranids would work.
Tyranids would work great.
I think to an extent Eldar would work, or certainly I think Drakari would work. It's a biggie.
Yeah, or you could just have Eldar Corsairs if they're not from a specific craft world or whatever. You can have one in the Inquisitor's retinue, things like that.
Yeah, things like that could work. Tau, you could be diplomats.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have like a big fight with them. You'd just have like, who are these weird like fish dudes?
Yeah.
They wouldn't need to have big super robot suits straight away.
I think even Chaos Demons would be a bit weird as well. They're just not quite. They're just a little bit too. Don't say it.
Look, the demons needs to be like the Balrog was in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
A horrific thing that happens once and that is truly terrifying.
Yeah.
Like if a demon shows up, okay. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gone.
Because you've got this scale of threat.
Yes.
And if we're kind of saying that we don't really want Space Marines to turn up initially, if you think the demons scare the Space Marines...
Yeah, you can't have a Great Unclean one show up all of a sudden.
You can't have Angron turning up in like season 2. Do you know what I mean? It's like things...
And that's the other thing. Like if you go as far as Primarchs, that Space Marines can barely regard.
Yeah.
Like the humans will just melt.
Yeah.
Because you've got humans to Space Marines, which is one thing. Space Marines to a Primarch is another. Primarch to the Emperor, like there's just scales of not being able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really kind of believe that these sorts of characters probably shouldn't be on film.
Yeah.
They're the thing which is spoken about. You know?
Yes.
You don't see them.
You don't need to see them. They're almost they're demigods.
Yeah.
At that point, you know, like
100%.
You just
They need to be referenced.
Yeah.
And their deeds spoken about.
Yeah.
And that for me is kind of, to sort of round us out, I think, why for me the heresy works. Because you're reading about it in the context of, generally speaking, unless you're playing heresy, playing 40K. So it's like you're reading like myths and legends of like bygone heroes. And you know you're kind of it being told kind of through the lens of like, you know, the victors, kind of almost the Black Library almost feels like it's being retold by like Imperium scholars. Even though you're getting perspectives from everyone, it always feels like it's ancient history, and that's kind of a nice vibe to it. It's built the world you're in now, and I think if they just keep it tight and focused and have a good landing point into the 41st millennium, then later on they can do cool other bits, but you just need to get that initial getting the main character right and the scope small enough for it to be comprehensible.
Now I'm going to say something controversial, which goes against everything that we've said.
Oh, okay.
But it did just occur to me, like, maybe it would be possible to do it about Space Marines and it succeed.
Yeah,
I believe anything's possible with the right creative people
definitely
behind it.
could.
But, you know, what's the name of the series again? Is it Angels of Death?
Angels of Death, yeah.
Or like,
It's very
that is mainly Space Marines, Space Marine Squad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really good. It's really good. Now, in theory, the scope of that is not so vast that you couldn't do it live action.
For sure.
And I would watch that.
Yeah,
I would watch that.
That is true.
But obviously, that's original material as well.
That is
so
original material.
you'd have to write something, you know.
You.
I don't know if Cavill's into Blood Angels. He's more of a custody guy. What's he
I
going to
reckon he's probably into Blood Angels.
Everyone's into.
I think he's
Blood
into
Angels.
Space Marines in general. Come on,
Angels
Cavill.
are
I know
Then
you're
if
into Space Marines.
If you were to do the Space Marine show, I think there may be like the human series spin-off they might do wouldn't quite have the same impact. You've already seen all the Space Marines.
Yeah, you've just shown everything, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I
I'm
think,
very stressed for Henry Cavill.
Look, to be honest with you,
Very stressful.
so am I, because the thing is, ultimately, all three of us are here and we want it to be a roaring success.
Yeah, we do.
Because we're as fans, we want to watch it.
Yeah.
You know, as a fan of Henry, I want him to succeed.
oh yeah, I love Henry.
You know, I just hope. I mean, you know, and we probably won't see anything. I mean, for a start, we
years
also have
off,
to
yeah.
acknowledge maybe it won't ever happen as well.
No, it
These
is.
things do just suddenly fall
Why
through.
did you say that? It's sad.
Because I don't want to, I'm sort of clinging, I don't want to overhope and then be so disappointed, you know, so I'm holding a bit of myself back, you know. The walls are up a little bit here.
I'm not ready for
I'm
that.
ready to just like knock them down and just go full running through the grassy hills.
What are we
but
gonna
I'm
do
just
when
not quite there yet.
What about, were they going to do a teaser trailer at some point?
If they do
What
a
are we gonna
teaser
do?
trailer, if they do a teaser trailer, I will take off out of this facility. Okay, I will hit Mars before Musk does. But
That could be the origin story of Holy Mars.
yeah, exactly. It's not the Void Dragon underneath there. It's Lawrence.
Firing up. Well, on that bombshell and that incredible tidbit of lore. Oh man, what a good conversation. That was great. I think just power to Cavill. And if you're watching, feel free to come on and have a chat.
Oh, if you need some extras as well.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
we'll run up for that. Yeah.
I'll be an exploding cultist. I don't mind. Blow me up, Henry Cavill.
Oh, well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching at home. We really hope you enjoyed that. We obviously always want to hear your comments about what you think. What do you want out of Warhammer channel? Do you think we're all talking nonsense? You do just want to see a load of Space Marines all in their full glory? Or do you want to see the Horus Heresy? All in the comments. We love hearing from you, so that'll be fantastic. We have been Tabletop Tactics. I have been the Bard, aka James Jordan. You have been Chaos Lord Beard. And you have been the Spider, Mr. Lawrence Baker. We will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!